Last time I talked about the way words can be used as hooks for grappling on to other associations. I also explained how they could be used for two main purposes, for recall and for creative uses. Now, I call these key words. Throughout the series, we've been suggesting the connective nature of words. You probably recall this one. So you see how music, like all other words, has those millions of little grappling hooks. Now, today I want to take this one step further and to show you how these grappling hooks connect to each other on patterns in your mind. But first, how do we transmit and receive information? Well, one natural way is by speaking. Here I am speaking to you. I am speaking one word at a time. You are receiving one word at a time. Similarly, in written form. The symbols appear in lines and are read one word or one group at a time. In television, we have both. Now, because of this linear dependence that we have, it's been assumed that our minds are also linear. Look, for example, at the way we list things. Look at how often lists occur in our everyday lives. Bills, instructions of all kinds. So the case for our minds being linear and list-like looks pretty convincing. But fortunately, the so-called evidence is wrong. Let's have a look again at the argument about speaking. Now, granted, I am speaking one word at a time, and you are receiving one word at a time. But that's only the physical part. What about the actual process that goes on in the mind? Now, as I'm speaking, I'm not simply drawing words out one at a time from my mind. I'm considering all the possibilities of words that there might be, and then selecting those which I hope at the moment will be most important. And as all that process is going on, I'm also seeing the things in front of me, the camera, also aware of you, of myself trying to speak to you to communicate. So I'm picking from a whole range of words the ones which seem appropriate at the time. In addition to that, I'm keeping things like my breath rhythm going, my heartbeat, and in fact, the whole of my mind is holding in fairly delicate balance all the chemicals inside it. So it isn't a linear or list-like process. Speaking is choosing from a totally delicate, interwoven, interlaced network of ideas. Now, similarly with you, when you are listening to what I am speaking to you, you are criticizing, analyzing, understanding, watching, perhaps even thinking about something else. The same thing applies to print. When we are reading the lines, our mind is busy making associations, building images, going through exactly the same intricate processes as for speaking. So our minds don't work in patterns, don't work in lines. Make sure you remember that. Don't work in lines, they work in patterns. And I'm going to now give an example of how we can use this. Now let's imagine that I am particularly interested in Rasputin. Rasputin, the notorious Russian monk who dealt with the aristocracy in Russia just before the Russian Revolution. And I'm reading a book about Rasputin and want to make notes on the subject. Now what I'm going to do is to make notes in pattern form, not in the normal list-like form, but pattern notes. So I start where the pattern, where the idea would start, in the center. In the center of my notes, I put Rasputin. I do not put a list with Rasputin at the top, because he is not the top of the list, he is the center of the idea. Now, around the idea of Rasputin, there are four major themes. The first of these is nationalism. So we print clearly the word nationalism on a line associating it to the center idea. Next was his involvement in politics. So again, on a line, we print clearly the word politics. The third of these four main items was his involvement in religion. So again, we print, and again, connected to the center, the word religion. And finally, rounding off the big four, was his almost legendary involvement in sex. Now here, to begin with, we have the center, the core of the pattern, the core of the idea, and the four main sub-branches. But obviously this isn't where the whole thing ends. There are other ideas attached to these more major, more central ideas. And so we simply build up the pattern by adding other ideas to the ones we've already got. And we add in the same way, connecting with lines, printing clearly on. So let's have a look at nationalism. We know that he was very involved with his country, which was Russia. So we add here Russia. Coming down to politics, we know that he was involved with the rulers of the country at the time. So we have Nicholas and Alexandra. His involvement with religion was perhaps one of the main features of him, and we know here that he was a mystic, that he claimed to have extraordinary powers, and here we can branch off this sub-branch, that he claimed to be and was an exceptional hypnotist, and he was also a healer. Now when it came to sex, he was voracious, and so we might here simply note the numerous mistresses that Rasputin had. Now even now, the pattern is obviously not complete. There are more ideas that can be added to it. And so just to give you an idea of how the pattern would be built up without actually going into all the detail, you would find that from the nationalism branch here, there would obviously be other major branches, branches coming off Russia, and branches coming off the sub-branches. In politics, you would have the various problems, etc., with Nicholas and Alexandra. There would obviously be other major sections of politics. On religion, one would be concerned with his development in religion, the different kinds of sects to which he belonged, and so one would have sub-branches of this. And on sex, each one of the involvements had other ramifications, and so one could add to those. Now even here, the pattern isn't completely finished. We can link aspects of the pattern to itself. We're not restricted, as one normally is, and can join parts to connect with each other. So that, for example, we have sex and his mistresses. Now it was assumed that he had some kind of sexual involvement with Alexandra. So if this is her in the group here, we have an arrow which links him from this part to this part. Now again, we know that he was a healer, and this is how he became involved with the Russian rulers. He, in fact, was claiming to be able to heal Alexandra's hemophiliac son. So we link the pattern from healing to Alexandra and where her son might have been. Now, looking at this pattern, we can see that it actually is a reflection of the mind's images, the images that the mind actually has inside it. The mind is far happier working like this than it is with lines and lists. So let's see how we can apply patterns for, say, note-taking.